Welcome to Growth Economy, Australia's B2B growth podcast. I'm Alex Hipwell. Each episode, we bring you B2B founders, CMOs, marketing and sales leaders to find out what makes them successful and what was behind their failures. Let's dive right into today's episode. Here's Shaheen Hoda.
Today, we're talking about the do's and don'ts of landing enterprise deals, how you should approach it, and what you should be doing, both from sales and marketing perspective. Before we do that, I'm going to quickly introduce our panelists. So we have Greg Anderson, VP of Sales APAC at TechTarget. If you're new to the B2B enterprise space, TechTarget helps B2B companies identify, influence, and engage active buyers in the technology market using intent data. Now, Greg runs the entire sales operation for the APAC region, which includes India, Singapore, and ANZ. So we have a lot to gain today. Second panelist is Omer Molad, CEO and co-founder of Vervoe, a SaaS platform that pretty much replaces the traditional hiring process with skill assessment and allowing candidates to be evaluated on job-related tasks rather than just a piece of paper being your CV. Now, not only do these guys have the backing of some big names like Seek and Russell & Kogan, but they've also landed some big clients from people like companies like MYOB, Auspos, Walmart, the biggest. I think they're still the biggest employer in the US. So there's plenty of insight there. Really excited to talk from the perspective of a young company to talk about enterprise. And last but not least, we have Ljubica Radoicic, Marketing Director of APAC for Hexagon, a software solution provider for visualizing, building, and managing safe and efficient smart digital asset. She's also writing the book on revenue marketing engines. Now, this is not just, one of those books that experts go and self-publish on Amazon. This is battle-tested, peer-reviewed stuff. So we're very grateful for having her here today. On that note, let's dive in. Omer, let's start with yourself. Let's start with, in your opinion, what is the difference? How is marketing to enterprise different compared to marketing to SMB?
Okay, I think there are three main differences, and they all have to do with people, user, risk, and money. So the first is when you're selling to a small business, the person you sell to is using the product that you sell to them. When you're selling to a very big company, the person that you sell to is almost certainly not using it. And so once you convince them, there's 50 other people that haven't heard of you that now use the product, and that can work for or against you. They might be fans, but the buyer doesn't know about you, or they might not know about you and someone's bought software on their behalf. That's the first thing. The second thing is risk. And what I mean by risk is the appetite. So if you're a small business owner, you're focused on growing and you're prepared to take risk. You want to do things to grow your business. If you're an executive at a big company, you don't want to get fired. You don't want to get embarrassed. So your mindset is how to reduce risk. So you don't want to go out on a limb. You just want to make sure that you're not going to make the wrong decision. So it's a very different mindset. And the third thing is money. And I'm not talking about the amount of money, but it's about who pays. When you're selling to a small business, the money is a very personal thing. It comes from the owner of the business, or even if it's a startup that's venture-backed, you feel very close to the amount of money that you're spending. At a big company, you don't even know who's spending. It's not your money. It's the company's money. It's finance. It's some other department. It's in some budget that's far away. You're not thinking about it. That doesn't mean it's easy to get them to pay, but they think about money in a very different way, in a less personal way. And so when we're selling to big companies and small companies, they're the three main differences that we see in the psychology.
And Ljubica, what about you? What do you think? I mean, I know you're a very big advocate of, when we're talking enterprise, we always say you got to know your customer, right?
Yep.
Right. The KYC. But when we're talking about enterprise, it becomes even more important than usual, right? Is that the case? And what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, totally. I think from a marketing perspective, selling into enterprises, totally different because the sale is really based on value selling and outcome-based selling. So you are selling business transformation and change for the business. And I think as Omer said, definitely it's a complex buying committees. It's a longer sales cycle. At the foundation for that is a much more strategic approach from a marketing perspective. So to me, enterprise sales is really synonymous with account-based marketing and that strategic approach. So at the core of that is, as you said, really KYC, knowing your customer. But that goes even beyond just knowing your customer to actually being aligned around, well, what does that ideal customer profile look like? And that goes even beyond personas to really identifying and say, well, what does the company size look like? The revenue, employees, what is their tech stack? How mature are they? When it comes to specific process areas relating to, for example, solutions that a company offers, how do they manage those processes? How do they buy? How are decisions being made? And so using all of that intelligence to really build up the ideal customer profile and then really take that insight to then identify, well, okay, well, what does this market look like that we're going after? Because when you're selling enterprise, the market all of a sudden becomes very narrowed down and it becomes very well defined. And using those insights around the ideal customer profile to then build and align your sales, your marketing, your business development strategy. So there's a lot more kind of strategic thinking and insight that needs to be put into developing really a sales and marketing approach to enterprise sales.
Yeah, we're definitely going to talk about that a lot more. And I think the key term over there was getting a lot more defined, a lot more granular. Where when you define your ICP, it becomes really narrow in the sense that it could be a couple hundred even companies rather than the SMB that there are thousands of thousands. Greg, what are your thoughts in terms of especially in the early days when you're defining the ICP and you're trying to communicate and make marketing understand, because enterprise and marketing or selling to enterprise traditionally has been very sales focused, right? And it's really been in the recent maybe decade or so that marketing has started to come into the enterprise space. But one of the challenges that marketing has is understanding the customer, because sales is on the front line, dealing with customers all the time. What are your thoughts in terms of building ICPs and ideal customer profiles and helping marketing get a better picture of the customer?
Yeah, I think it's a really important question to understand the difference between sales and marketing when it comes to the enterprises. To your point, sales has been on the front line, so to speak, but I would argue that sales is really taking that last 20 to 30% of the buyer's journey with those customers, and marketing has always led them for that first 60, 70% of that journey. So I think marketing and sales needs to very much be on the same page in terms of the customers that they're going after, who are the users, who are the influencers, who are the buyers, who are the approvers, and to be smart about surrounding them. And I think there needs to be somewhat of a breakdown in the stereotype that marketing needs to go and source a lot of things and bring that to sales. If you look at any of the Gartner studies or anything about B2B buying, the cycles are very long. They're very complicated. They're not linear. And traditionally, people have thought that marketing owns that first, 2/3 of it. So I think marketing owns the whole buyer's journey, but so does sales. And I think they need to start out with identifying the right accounts and identifying the right messaging where, I'd almost argue that sales needs to become more like marketers in how they approach accounts. That first portion being, you need to inform and advise buying teams, which is what marketing has always done with collateral, with best practices information. You show the brand, but you show how the brand can add value, and you show, unique best practices within the space where your solution can come in and help, but not in such a sales focused. That's what sales needs to do at the same time. So I think, making sure that marketing and sales are sitting down at the very least on a quarterly basis, ideally on a monthly basis, identifying customers, talking about objections that you're coming into, identifying key value props that marketing is putting into collateral, but then sales is then having to articulate throughout the process, and then just revisiting that over and over. So, they should really act as one unit and not two units that approach two different sections of the buy cycle.
Yeah, sales and marketing alignment. I mean, that's a hot topic. But Omer, Vervoe sells both to SMB and enterprise, if I'm not mistaken,
That's
right?
right.
And in the SMB space, the whole concept of lead generation and demand generation and demand gen and all that is pretty strong, and it's heavily relied on. Do you see there's the same reliance when it comes to enterprise on lead gen and kind of demand gen activities, or is it different?
I mean, there's some overlap, and that overlap's probably Google and word of mouth. So people, regardless of company size, they talk when there's something that they get value from, and everybody searches for solutions on Google. But generally speaking, the lead sources are different, and one of them is a volume game. And the other one is, you can get one customer in a quarter or in a month, and that'll make a massive change. So a conference, for example, you go to a conference, you can get a customer that'll pay you $250,000 or $500,000, but you'll not meet, small businesses at a conference. They don't go there, and they probably don't read blogs, and they don't do a lot of other things that big companies do. And there are a lot of big companies you can't get into unless you have a warm introduction. And so for some of these things, you need field sales and field marketing, and you can't play the volume game. And so I think the go-to-market approach is very different. One is about having lots and lots of tentacles, casting a wide net, and the other one's about being very targeted. And it was mentioned earlier around account-based marketing. With an enterprise sales approach, you're focusing a lot of your energy on many people inside one company, and you're doing that with a few companies. With a wider SMB approach, you're just trying to get to one person in each company and across lots of companies. And so if you think about that means different marketing channels, different sales cycle, etc. Now, having said that, as I mentioned earlier, everybody searches on Google. And so when you look at inbound, it can seem similar where someone searches, they find you, it ends up in a demo request or a free trial, and then there's a discussion. But that's where the similarity ends, because after that point, the value-based selling is where the SMB process ends. They'll see value and buy. Whereas with the enterprise, value-based selling is the very, very beginning. They'll see value, and then they'll spend 9 months going through procurement and convincing people who are blockers and demanding features and integrations and all this stuff that has nothing to do with whether your product solves their problem. It's got to do with them managing risk and managing procurement and SLAs and making sure that you can service them at the level that they expect, or just politics and bullshit, which can be part of enterprise selling as well.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about that. That's a hot topic to go through. And I know, Greg, you got a rule of knowing at least 3 people per account. Is that right?
We're looking to get at least 3 champions per account. So I think to Omer's point, there's, especially within an enterprise, there's a number of different challenges, but the versatility of those companies is very different. Where in SMB, they can pivot their processes to work within your product if it can help your business. Whereas an enterprise, it's vice versa, is you need to build your product around their processes. So there's always the customizations that need to go into that. But that means you've got to know so many different people at that organization. So what I try to look at to have my team do from a sales perspective is to look at 10 stakeholders, choose your top 3 to 5 companies, customers out there, identify 10 stakeholders that fit the profile of, a user, an influencer, a buyer, and an approver, somebody in that C-suite that's there. And to make sure that you start to get your messaging out in front of all those different people. Of that, you want to have at least 3 to 4 of them understand who you are and the value you can provide. And if you can get 2 to 3 champions per account, and that can be at the buyer level and the user level, that's where you start to get sticky and to expand. It also protects you because there is always turnover in enterprises. So if your reliance on one point of contact and that person leaves or moves into a different role, you need to start that whole process. So I think it's, similar to anybody that's done any sort of rock climbing, always maintain 3 points of contact to make sure that you're secure. The same goes with enterprises and selling and maintaining relationships and cross-selling. So it's really, really important to not limit yourself.
I like it. Ljubica, we talked about developing a good understanding of who they were going after. We talked about, kind of where lead gen and demand gen come in, and how there are certain similarities, but there are certain differences as well. Where do you think the might of marketing comes in when it comes to enterprise and closing enterprise customers, right? Positioning the company as an authority. Where do you see an organization should put their marketing effort in order to influence enterprise deals?
I think going back to Greg's point, I think it's really a joint effort between sales and marketing, like they need to work hand in glove. So while marketing does a lot of that heavy lifting, sort of at the early stages of really building the awareness, building demand, credibility for the brand, because that does make the sales rep's life a lot easier when he goes into, or she, into a particular account, because obviously that credibility is there, so it's easier to have that conversation. But I think the marketing role is really at every stage of the buyer's journey, at every stage of the different sales gate and the sales stages, just depending on, again, how to strategically deploy marketing capabilities. So as we said at that beginning, it is about building the awareness and the demand for the solution, but then further in the sales funnel, it could be more around kind of trying to accelerate the deal, whether it's through more kind of strategic engagements with an account, whether it could be on a specific customized events or experiences, like it could be a C-level engagement, customer stories, or a specific piece of content and collateral. So that's where really the kind of the sales and marketing journey, I think it's just, it's continuous. But it really depends on the journey and where marketing can be strategically deployed to support the sale.
Yeah, I love that. So marketing job pretty much doesn't end, especially with enterprise, doesn't end with the acquisition.
With the sale, correct.
Yeah, or when the opportunity is generated. It also, you can also leverage marketing throughout that pipeline until it becomes a customer, and probably even after that. We touched on selling SMB and enterprise when we were talking about the marketing component. But let's talk about the mentality of the salespeople who are a salesperson who's used to SMB and a salesperson who's used to, or who's going to do enterprise. Omer, what are your thoughts on these differences in terms of, does it do the trick to have the same salesperson who's been doing SMB and put them in enterprise and say, fire?
No, I mean, sometimes it's unavoidable if you don't know your market and you're a startup. But generally speaking, it should not be the same person. And in fact, when you're hiring in sales, one of the first, arguably the most important criterion is deal size. So capability at that deal size, rather than do they know the industry, which is far less important. So if you're hiring a seller, you need to understand a couple of things really quickly. What's the sales motion and what's the deal size and segmentation? So in SMB, it's intensity of effort, it's velocity, okay? And you want someone who can do that, who can have 30 calls a day and can sort of, have that sort of intensity and grit. But they don't necessarily have to be like an amazing negotiator. They don't need to have like gravitas with the C-suite. That's not really what they need to have. Conversely, with an enterprise motion, it's a long cycle and you're doing few deals. And the way that those deals get done, as we've discussed, is through strategic selling, navigating through the people network inside that company, and negotiating. And a lot of that negotiation has nothing to do with value-based selling. The demo is only like the first 10%. And so you need someone who is a negotiator, who is strategic, who can map out the org, who can understand the buying influences. This terminology is not even relevant. In SMB, there's no buying influencer. There's like the person who owns 10 flower shops and they're either going to buy or not buy, right? And you need to talk to 100 of them a week. But you're selling to Microsoft, they're going to be people who are not even visible to you who are going to block you for all sorts of reasons. There are going to be people who care about risk, who care about money, who care about security. They care about different things. And you need to basically they all need to be your best friend. They need to be advocates. And that's just a fundamentally different mentality. It's a different skill. They're arguably different professions, high volume selling versus high value selling. And so I think when you're growing a company, you need to understand really quickly what your motion is, who you're selling to, and then build a sales team that specializes in that type of selling. And there's one other point that I'd add, which is the vast majority of salespeople, whether they're selling to small or big businesses, doesn't matter what they're selling to, expect to have a playbook. So they expect to come in and know what the playbook is. And when you're starting a business, which is relevant, I mean, I can speak for us as a startup, you do not have a playbook. You need to build one. And there's only a very small group of people who know how to build a playbook. Renaissance salespeople, people who know how to define the sales motion via experimentation and understand what works, what doesn't, and what needs to change. And they're very special people, but it's important to recognize that if you're starting out and you hire someone without that in mind, they're going to expect to be told what the sales process is. And if you don't have one, it's going to end in tears. So I just wanted to mention that as well.
Yeah, I love that. So it's not, I got a salesperson. Here you go, buddy. You manage the rest. Now, on that note, Greg, you have a saying. You say that in enterprise sales, you have to look for the signals, right? You got to extract the signals from all the data, which we've touched on a little bit. But what do you mean by signals? What are some of the important things to think about when a salesperson is looking at an enterprise deal?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different signals. So if you want to look at even starting from some of the marketing side of things. So, ABM has really been around forever. People define, who their ideal customer is based off of, starting out with demographics. And then you pick your personas in there and you go after them. That's traditionally been ABM. So the challenge now is picking up the signals of which of those accounts do we define as in market. And pre-COVID, some of those signals would be, like as Omer said earlier, showing up to an event. If you've got 3 to 4 people that showed up to a conference that's, showing a certain amount of different technologies, that is a pretty important signal that multiple people would have left the office to show up and to evaluate some vendors. You don't really have those signals now. So now you've got to start to look at some digital signals. So, go to where your customers are spending time, where they're doing research online, especially in the enterprise space. As Omer said, that's kind of where we play. We've got about 140 sites that provide buying cycle content to enterprises to help them understand, what sort of cloud model do I deploy, public, private, hybrid. So picking up a signal that somebody has been on that site for a month, multiple buying team, that's a really good signal to then tell your sales team, hey, this is worth going to spend 3 months after these guys. But from a sales perspective, you're bringing it down to the individual level. You've got to be really smart about how you pay attention to those signals. And, I think it goes to Omer, it's a certain type of person that can pay attention to that. It's the people that are responding and willing to take an hour out of their day with you. If you get somebody to sit down and speak to you for an hour, that's a really important signal that there is a true pain point at that company. And then seeing how they respond during that call with how they respond to questions and the answers that they give is really important. But other little signals can be, if for example, you've got 3 people that showed up to this webcast from a startup, I would take that as a signal that these guys are trying to figure out how to sell into enterprises. And for Omer, that's probably somebody that they may want to go sell their solutions to help them figure out how to hire. So paying attention to those signals as a sales rep, it's not what you're going to get from a velocity person who just moves. It's got to be somebody that kind of sits back from a strategic perspective and says, I saw this person posted these 3 things on LinkedIn recently. Why might they have been doing that behind the scenes? Here's a different way that I can potentially engage them. My marketing team said that 4 people looked at this piece of content in the last month. Maybe none of those individuals are the decision maker, quote unquote, the VP title, the director title, but that would mean that somebody at that level is deploying resources to go and do some research. So I need to go and spend a lot of time giving them that information, giving them that advice. So a signal is not somebody that comes to your website and asks for a demo. That's an easy signal. It's the subtle ones that I think companies, both marketing and sales, really need to pay attention to. And again, to what Omar said, define a playbook around how to engage people based off of those signals. Because that's really all you have to go on now is behavioral data. And it is all over the place, but you've got to figure out which behaviors actually are triggering signals that you can then sell around. And that's going to depend on what industry you're in, what your product is, and really who your customers are. But it's much more than, people raising their hand and saying, I do want to have a demo. There's a lot of different things you can go down into. It would be specific to, like I said, products and things like that.
Shaheen, can I just jump in with one additional point on this topic?
Yeah, go for it.
I don't know apologies if you were going to get to this, but there's another side to this, which is compensation, critically important. And it's not about how much, although enterprise sellers can tell you now it's more, but that's not the point. The point is that in sales, compensation drives behavior. Now it's not 100% of the driver. People are, they're human beings. They respond to a lot of other things, but it is more important than in any other profession. It plays a more important role. And so when you're thinking about compensation, you want to make sure that you're aligning rewards with performance and performance in terms of the objectives of the company. So if you think about what we've, Greg and I both said around the SMB game's a velocity game, the enterprise game's a strategic game. You can't compensate people it's probably a completely different comp structure because one is like trying to do many deals a week. And the other one, you might wait 9 months to do one deal. And so you need to think about how do you want people to behave in those different motions and not drive the wrong behavior. If you compensate them in the wrong way, they're going to go after the wrong targets. They're going to try and close things at the wrong pace. And it ends up being, it ends up sort of clashing. People aren't doing the things that you want them to do. And that comes back to having the maturity as a company and understanding of what are you going after, what's the sales motion, and incentivizing people to deliver that, including marketing, by the way, in the right way, so that the whole company, all the ships are sailing in the same direction. I just want to mention that because I can't think of anything in sales without thinking about compensation. It just all goes together.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
And to add to that, and I'm sure Ljubica can expand on this as well, is compensation, but those KPIs. In examples of it where I've seen companies fall down is people are compensated with their base and their commissions and different bonus structures and things. But if somebody's on a monthly target, that is a velocity target. You are never going to sell quality deals to an enterprise. If you're giving your team monthly targets, it needs to be quarterly at the very least, because those are typically what the buy cycles are. So if you're tasking sales reps, say you need to hit this benchmark of revenue every month, but you're tasking them to sell into enterprises where the buy cycles are 90 days, sometimes beyond that, those things are not going to align and they're going to drive the wrong behaviors. And similar to marketing, because our customers predominantly are marketers, and they know that they're selling into large enterprises. And oftentimes marketers will say, hey, I just need to deliver, 300 leads by the end of this month. From these particular companies that may or may not be in market. Also these particular titles on that. And the only reason for that is that sales is asking them to hit these benchmarks. And that detracts from what I've seen, the strategic side, where marketers know that they need to inform, advise, surround buying teams with content at different levels. But then they have to just kind of wedge in their KPIs to deliver that. And it really causes friction between the outcome you're trying to look for is a win with an enterprise, but the outputs that you're getting are just a bunch of names that come into a spreadsheet, CRM, that never convert. So as much as that's important for sales, I'm sure Ljubica can talk about that from a marketing perspective. I'd love that.
Yeah, marketing hits its targets and goes from there. So Ljubica, what are your thoughts? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting one. And maybe just to go back to kind of the mentality, the profile of the what I call the whale hunter, the kind of the big enterprise deals. I mean, it is all about really positioning as a business consultant at that level, because you're not selling a product, you're not selling on features and benefits. So you're really selling kind of a business solution. So again, just going back to that need for really specific individual to be successful at enterprise sales level. And again, I've seen time and time again where maybe a regular kind of sales rep is deployed, but that really impacts the size of the deal, because they're happy to just get the foot in the door and sell something. And I think that goes back to hitting those monthly targets versus really an enterprise deal that can take months or even years to get across the line. And so that's where that whole kind of specialist skill set and sales specialization really comes into play. I think from a marketing and kind of a revenue metrics perspective, I think that really goes back to what is kind of marketing compensated on, and how is marketing effectiveness measured. And I think if it is just based on those kind of what I call vanity metrics, MQLs, or what is a lead, then I think that really diminishes kind of the value of marketing. So it is really taking a more kind of a bigger picture view of marketing effectiveness and looking at more of attribution, impact on revenue, engagement, really accelerating through the pipeline. So it's a lot broader KPIs than just
Mm-hmm.
being measured on the MQL side of things, which I think can be blindsiding for a lot of marketers, because it is around the short term short-term wins, but it is also taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture as well.
Yeah, we always joke about marketing hitting its retweet targets. But look, I'm gonna look at the questions, but I want to come back, Ljubica, because I think and really talk about SDRs and what you've done at Hexagon and
Yep.
How that sits, because I think that ties in to compensation, that ties into personality and who's doing what. But let's just quickly take a few questions. Matthew Ben, would content marketing be the standout for enterprise sales enablement? Ljubica, what are your thoughts on that?
I think content marketing is key, right? I think it's kind of one of the strategies deployed, but it also has to be really tailored and targeted for a specific enterprise account. And that's where, again, we fall back on the whole need for an account-based marketing strategy. And again, effective content and storytelling, where this part of that is critical. So yes, content is key, really.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I see people thinking about content is a lot of times they're thinking SEO, especially, even if they're talking in enterprise. And even though that's important, I think that plays a secondary role. In SMB market, SEO is probably a big play, but in enterprise is probably having very customized content for accounts. It could be like a report specifically designed for one account. Is that something that you see as well, or you?
Yeah, definitely customized reports, even customized assessment tools. So different tools used for sales enablement, but also really used to, again, engage a contact and engage a lead. So I think, from that perspective, also just bring in more kind of customer stories. So a broader kind of content strategy around, well, how do we engage this particular account? What are the individuals within this account? What are their pain points and drivers? And again, take that information and working very closely with the sales team to, again, develop the right messaging and then the right content in the back of that to target that particular account. But I think maybe back to the point around kind of needing really a multi-pronged approach in enterprise sales. So while the account-based is great and obviously the content is key, I think it's important not to neglect other aspects and kind of other tactics within the marketing. And as you said, like SEO or SEM is one of them. So Google, and I've got a great kind of anecdote from my career history where we're promoting a new solution that was brought into the market from enterprise solution from the US, really well established. And we did quite a bit of marketing around it to, again, raise awareness of the solution. And then we deployed the SDR team to do prospecting. And they were calling it, again, one of the ideal customer profile identified accounts. And unfortunately, we were too late to the game. So they already narrowed down with two preferred suppliers who are our competitors, and they said, sorry guys, you just missed out because when we were searching for a solution like that, we couldn't find you. So hence why it's really important not to neglect search, and paid advertising, all of that, because it all has a role to play.
Gotcha. That sucks. Okay. All right. I'm going to take one more question before we jump back in and carry on, because I definitely want to cover the SDR stuff. Now, as lunches and dining is out, how are you socially engaging enterprise customers? Greg, you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. So it is challenging that, lunches and dining is out, but, I know a lot of the key topic of this was for startups to sell into enterprises. And as Omer was talking about earlier, funding is an issue when you're a smaller company trying to sell into these larger companies. So I would almost look at that as a positive, is it's leveled the playing field where there's not enterprise sales reps that can, hire a boat for a day and take out some key customers or take them to, a footy match into a luxury box. That's kind of gone. So it's leveled the playing fields where now you really just need to show value and help people understand how you can make their job and their organization better, smarter, faster, more efficient. So ways that we've been doing that is, we host a lot of these small webcasts like this. So just general best practices on digital marketing, digital selling. We'll do one-to-one workshops with some of our customers over Zoom, because everybody has weekly, monthly stand-up meetings, whether they're on marketing teams, selling teams, and people are getting tired of coming up with content for that, to be honest. So if you can come in as a third party and have a compelling presentation that's going to provide value and not be a sales pitch, that's a great way to do it. Other ways that we've been trying to cut through the noise, because phone is really challenging to get people to pick that up while they're at home, they're on mobiles, they've got kids around, people are screaming more than ever, is we've been using a lot more small clips of video selling. So it helps you to personalize a lot. So I had my whole team do this on Friday, where typically we have a 1-hour session where it's nothing but outbounds to set meetings up. It's a volume play to set meetings for the following week. This week I said pick 2 accounts and create a short 4 to 5 minute personalized video that either highlights something that a campaign that they're working with us on, or an offering that we have that's relevant for them and provide some value. So everybody recorded these, which was uncomfortable for the team to do so. And you send a little screenshot of that, and it's different and it's personal. And we got responses from people from really large organizations we've never heard from before that say, hey, we really appreciate that. We've shared it with other folks internally. So, I don't think it's necessarily the socializing with customers right now. It's the ability to connect and to personalize with them right now and give them quality information in an efficient way that doesn't require them to take 2 hours out for a demo or to schedule time when it's uncomfortable for them. So really, really simple tactics like that have worked well. And then, the last thing on that, I know there's a number of companies that do some cool things where you can send, an Uber Eats gift card to somebody and schedule some time. Some of those things are helpful, but I think that at this point, people are just trying to find ways to do their job quickly and spend as little time in front of a camera as possible.
That's very true. That's very true. So getting a boat is on TechTarget's the sales plays, huh?
We're value based. We're not, we're not trying to wine and dine. And we like to think that the solutions speak for themselves. So, we spend money on smart people and good resources.
Sounds good, but it sounds like it's fun to be a TechTarget customer. Okay, I want to come talk about SDRs. I really want to cover this one, and what is, where do they come in to play when it comes to enterprise sale? Now, one of the unique things about, especially here in Australia, about Hexagon is that you have sales development reps who are not under sales but under marketing, right? And they report to marketing. What is the importance of sales development reps, SDRs in enterprise sales? Because sometimes people argue that in enterprise sales, you really need that AE. The AE is the account executive is going to be taking most of the responsibility. They have a couple of accounts. But Ljubica, I'd love to hear from your side in terms of what your experience is. And I know you have a lot of experience here.
Yeah, definitely.
When it comes to SDRs and enterprise deals.
Yeah. So I think it really boils down to how do you define the role of an SDR, and that's where sales specialization really comes into play. So there's a lot of kind of different ways that people or companies are using SDRs. So some of them might be really deployed more as the inbound. So just kind of picking up the phone and following up on a lead or qualifying. Whereas for us, SDRs are really deployed in a much more strategic manner. So they're what I would call more of a lead development rep. So they're there, they work the enterprise accounts, really prospecting deep into accounts and work closely with the AE to basically make the AE's job a lot easier. So they'll sit down with an AE, really map out the account and then look at, and I think that's where, as we said, enterprise-based selling is account-based selling, and you're selling into multiple personas or kind of multiple people involved in the buying decision. So getting into an account just through one person is not enough. And that's where the SDRs can really help, again, uncover those needs and have conversations at different levels of the organization and really help uncover kind of the needs and the pain points and the challenges that a particular prospect is facing as it relates to a particular process area or technology area, depending on what solution you're trying to position. So they're really deploying and kind of starting to build that relationship and that credibility with the accounts, and then really relaying back that information to the account executive as that next step. So their role is really to listen, to build up the needs profile, and to offer some level of qualification in terms of the ICP. So you're making sure that we are ticking the right boxes from a kind of a customer profile perspective, but also that this candidate is at the right level of maturity. And again, for a solution to be deployed and to have a further conversation, and they're really carrying that information into the AE to then set up a follow-up and appointment for the AE to then have a more of a deep dive and a more of a business level conversation. So it's not talking product, not talking any demos. That could be maybe third or fourth meeting, depending on, again, how the conversation evolves. But they're really deployed there as part of a needs assessment and intel gathering team to then rally that back into the sales organization and to really help position the AE as a more of a strategic consultant rather than just someone that's there to talk about a product.
Right, selling something. Omer, what are your thoughts on SDRs?
I think it depends on, I don't think there are any rules. I think it depends on what you're trying to do. So, is outbound a channel, right? So if outbound is a channel, then you should build an SDR machine. And there's a book called Predictable Revenue, which talks about that in great detail. And in that book, the very strong view is that you should separate outbound and inbound completely from each other. So if you can get outbound to work, and by outbound I mean prospecting, so email, and it's usually email, calling, and messaging, LinkedIn or other platforms together in a sequence. You need a person to do that. You need a toolkit, a stack to do that, whether that's SalesLoft or Outreach.io or Mixmax or whatever for email, and then it'll connect into HubSpot or Salesforce, and you'll typically buy data. So ZoomInfo, Discovery.org, they're now the same thing, so that you know who to go after. And that's what an SDR will do. Now, on the other hand, there's no rule that says that you have to have SDRs if you're selling. You might be developing your leads through mainly inbound or through field marketing like conferences or content marketing or something else. And your customers may not respond well to traditional outbound. So, and I'll be looking at the questions in the Q&A, and my answer to every single question is the same. It depends.
It depends.
So every single question is like, do I have this? Should I have that? There's no rule. Every company sells differently. It depends on your customers. Are your customers on LinkedIn? Maybe. Do that, are you selling shampoo or software? It really depends. So you have to figure out what works for you. Now, and there's no rule that cold calling works or doesn't work. Of course it can work. It's proven. There are companies that generate billions in revenue and it's all outbound. But conversely, with some buyers, it won't work at all. And so I wish there was a playbook, then it would be really easy. But unfortunately, every company has to figure out for itself what is the right motion. So I think what I would say about SDRs is that one of the things that kind of bothers me about the whole kind of sales industry is the traditional career path is you come out of college, you do an SDR role for 12 to 18 months, then you become a closer. Or AE, account exec, which is a closer. But actually, they're fundamentally different skills. So there are people who are amazing prospectors and they're not good closers. And there are people who are really good closers and they're crap prospectors. And I don't necessarily see that you have to that is the progression. There are some people who can be very senior, very well-paid prospectors. I know I'm sort of speaking here against, I'm going to sort of draw the wrath of salespeople the world over, but the reality is...
Greg unmuted, mate. Greg unmuted.
I was going to say, I agree with you 100%. I've got SDRs rolling into me. I've got our field account execs rolling into me, which those handle net new, more of the SMB sales. And I've got our enterprise account reps that roll into me. And it 100% is dependent on who that person is. It has nothing to do with their experience. It has to do with their natural skill set. Where are they willing to learn? What do they enjoy? We have a guy that is a phenomenal SDR FAE rep, and he wants to stay in that because he enjoys the hunts, he enjoys the close. We have others that don't like to make 50 calls a day, that aren't comfortable being told no over 100 times every single week. They want to spend 3 hours researching in accounts. They want to understand who their customers are, what their buying process is. They're the analytical people that just kind of get stuck into work and are happy to, frankly, have less interaction than some of the outbound. So, Omer, I couldn't agree.
And we had a person who was a phenomenal prospector, outperformed everybody. He would get appointments with really big companies. And we lost him because he wanted to be a closer. And that was just it. He saw that as like a status thing. And he just wasn't that wasn't his strength. He wasn't really as polished, and he wasn't as sort of good a negotiator, and he'd get flustered. It just wasn't, but he was he could get people to pick up the phone and he could get them to listen and take a meeting. And that is an amazing skill that's very valuable. And so I think, it comes back to what is the right process, playing people to their strengths. We do not have SDRs. I can tell you, for example, we do not have SDRs. We do very little outbound, and we sell to very, very big companies. And that's not because we don't believe in SDRs. We believe in what works with our customers. If we were able to get outbound working in a certain way, we would have 10 SDRs. It's just not, but there are other things that work better for us that cost less and get better results. So we invest in them. It's as simple as that. There's no kind of Bible around this. It's just, that's what we've tried a bunch of things. We ruled some of them out. They may work eventually, but they'll take longer. And we know that every time we get an opportunity to tell our story at some form of event, we get enterprise customers, for example. So let's invest in that. And that's that is the key. And this is why I talked earlier about Renaissance salespeople, like building a playbook. You need someone, and they're probably going to be a closer. It's probably one closer and one marketing person in the beginning together to figure out what works, and by trying things, and by, surprise, talking to customers. And when you talk to customers, you'll work out what they respond to, and you can then build a process around that. I think that's the most important thing. I don't think there's any way of predicting in advance whether you need a team of SDRs or not, maybe. But what you need first is to know, can you sell and get someone to pay you money? And how are you going to find them? Get one of those, then get 5 of those and 10 of those. And then maybe you'll have a sense of what these people respond to. Are they on LinkedIn? Do they want to have many conversations? Do they want to buy credit card? You'll start to understand those kind of things.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I have to say, I totally agree with that. And it's not a one size fits all, but it really is what works for your business. I know for us, when we were starting out this whole initiative around SDRs, it was really a pilot project to say, well, okay, we've tried this outsourcing SDRs and tried an outsource model, and that didn't work. I've had the model work elsewhere, again, in a similar kind of construction tech space. So we deployed it really with a small team of 3 and scaled and it worked quite well. And then the model went global. So I think, it just depends on, again, the organization and really what, I think as Omer was saying and Greg, what customers respond to.
And it also depends on like the category and the product. So I always like to talk about toaster ovens as an example of like something really well known. So if you're selling a better toaster oven, then SDRs is a really good bet, because you call people and you say, listen, that toaster oven you got? I got a better one and it's cheaper. Okay. But if you're selling what we do, which people they don't even understand, it's like a change in behavior, then there needs to be a process of education. And so we don't want to interrupt their lunch because the pitch is not as simple. So what we need to do is educate them. And so our sales process is a consultative sales process where we have a discussion and we use content, we use video, we have discussions, we do a challenger sale, we do different things and then they hear about it from someone they trust. So it's referrals. But if you're selling something really well known, really well, like a pink skateboard, you can have an ad for marketing and then you can have someone pick up the phone or send an email. Value is immediately obvious. So I think, again, it comes back to this understanding of like, what are you selling and what's the psychology of the person who you're trying to sell to? And that then dictates what is the process and the people that you need.
Fantastic. All right. Okay. We got like 6 minutes. All right. And we have a good number of questions. Okay. So I'm going to smash through these questions and whoever's going to answer them, you got 10, maximum 15 seconds to go through this. Okay. So we've got to keep it short and clean. Let's go with Mehdi. His question is, as a new start with very limited resources and employees, how can we engage in marketing to enterprise, especially if you have tens of old, well-established competitors in the market? Omer, you want to give this Ljubica, you want to give this a quick go?
So I think for a small team, it's really around, well, how can you disrupt the status quo? Because with a lot of these established players and you being the new kid on the block, it's around, well, how can you offer and find that niche that they're not offering? So part of that is obviously through building credibility, through thought leadership. But I think for me, and this may be something that we didn't touch on, is the power of brand and the power of brand storytelling. And that's something that's really neglected a lot in B2B because there's a lot of kind of investment in lead gen and demand gen, but really having an effective brand that could come through and the brand story can really help differentiate in a very saturated and a very congested market.
Thank you. Go niche and build and work on brand.
I would say, so we're going to go rapid to jump in on that. I would say have a very clean website that tells your story. And similar to what Omer said, if you've got a bunch of legacy companies that are well known, use that to your advantage. You have to quickly explain how you differentiate, why you're more valuable, why you can move quicker and you're more nimble. Have a simple website that explains that. Create a few pieces of content that buyers can consume on their own that doesn't require them to sit down with your team, because frankly you haven't earned that right with your brand yet. So reach out to people through LinkedIn, find some people to send emails to, and find some really targeted spaces online where you can serve some of that content to them. But if you're simple, if you allow them to educate themselves on their own, and you can quickly differentiate between what everybody knows to be a standard and how you're different and why you're worth a conversation. I think you can do that from some guerrilla grassroots type marketing and some simple sales outreach.
Guerrilla marketing it is. Thank you very much. Okay, Adi is asking, what sort of things do you think marketing can do to support sales team that keep pushing out the deals close date?
Yeah, I would say have your sales reps ask better questions. If the close date is pushing out, that means that they're not ready to buy. So either they haven't conveyed the value or it's not really an opportunity. So I think they just need to ask questions. Why are you not moving ahead? Do we have a deadline? Did I miss something? Is it not the right time? So I don't think that marketing is going to accelerate those if it's already a deal. That's a sales thing they need to better qualify, and maybe they need to start over from a value building if they've missed that step.
Fantastic. Okay. Would you suggest separating enterprise sales teams and pipeline away from the SMB team? I think we answered this. Definitely separating those, both from staffing perspective and on reporting and KPIs, as you mentioned. Yep, definitely separate that. As a startup, when you manage to get attention of an enterprise in your product, how the contract and legal matters could be managed from that point forward. This is a good point. I don't think we're going to get to it. I know like there's some really juicy stuff there that we can dig out. Let this be the last question. Anyone wants to have a go at this?
Yeah, I think two things. One, understand what big companies require, and they're very similar in terms of security, in terms of legal. And then understand what you're prepared to tolerate. And if you've taken investment, so asking investors or board members to help with that initially, because they've done this type of thing before. So for example, limiting liability to 2 times deal size, getting security certification, we're ISO 27001 certified. There are similar things that come up again and again. Understand what they are. Otherwise you'll embarrass yourself with big buyers. It'll be obvious that you're not ready. And understand what they are, and know the things that you need to have, and then know which things you can push back on reasonably. And after a while, it becomes 80% repetitive, 20% variability between customers.
Thank you very much. Yes, embarrass yourself. Been there, done that. Okay. All right. On that note, thank you very much, everybody. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all the questions, but make sure you sign up for our Slack channel, which is growthcolony.org/Slack. We have a lot of discussions there, so make sure you jump on our Slack channel, and there are a couple of hundred people there that we can converse and bring your questions over there as well, and we can try to answer them. Omer, Ljubica, Greg, thank you so much. This was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it, and thank you for jumping on.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Hey, it's Alex again from X Growth. Thanks so much for joining us on this episode. If you enjoyed it, we'd love it if you take a moment to rate us on Apple Podcasts. It would really help get the word out to other B2B professionals. If you're hungry for more B2B content, make sure to join our Slack channel at growthcolony.org/Slack, where we share the latest B2B news, tactics, tips, and chat about problems we're facing in the B2B space and find solutions together. That's growthcolony.org/Slack. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you in the next episode.